Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to open this panel by thanking our honorable and very dear panelists who, despite their extremely busy schedule, they managed to make it and take it out on themselves to allocate this time with us and share the knowledge and experience. I'm also very grateful for your presence with us. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your inquisitiveness. Thank you for your patience and understanding. I know it's a little bit challenging that you're not with us today in person, but I invite you to utilize the live chat. I know we have a live chat that you can actually utilize and share your thoughts. Send us your comments, what you feel, so we can overcome that barrier. In the next hour, my guest and I, we will take a closer look at the definition of the currently guided social ecosystem and the definition of success within this ecosystem. The reason why I'm doing this is because in the past year in Dubai Expo, the Expo in Dubai, I was attending a women empowerment session, and there were organizations that are dealing with women empowerment, one of the leading organizations. And the speaker was highlighting success indicators that are approved, that they utilize to measure women's success. And she was talking about their leadership positions and the number of women in senior leader positions, and then the income and in comparison to in gender comparison, etc. Which made me think that question also, why are we putting ourselves or limiting ourselves in this, I should say, limiting context? And this is not necessarily the goal and the dream of many women. So that's why I'm really grateful to our partner Ashoka when we started working together, and they highlighted that they wanted us to address this redefinition of success. So today, my panelists and I are going to dive deeper in this subject, hopefully, from our perspective as well, and from the way we see it. And I hope by the end of the session, hopefully we will inspire you to think either further, or if you're in a position of influence, to take this and maybe make it, or rediscover or redefine what success really means for people, and take into consideration the holistic approach of this important concept for everyone. And without further ado, now we need to get the ball running. And please join me to welcome our dear and honorable speakers today. I start with Ms. Anne Miltenberg, who's a brand developer, who has dedicated her career to leveraging the power of brand for social and environmental justice. She's the author of Brand the Change Guidebook, which I highly recommend. I love it. I always keep going back to this book, by the way. And she's the founder of Brand the Change organization, which is a school that trains change makers in brand thinking skills. Some of her notable work includes training young women leaders in East Africa to build movements, women re-entering the job market in Saudi Arabia, and this is how we met, and to help these women build their personal brand. She is Dutch, so she helped the Dutch Ministry of Defense reimagine themselves as the Ministry of Peace. How wonderful is that? And then my second speaker is an inspiring and also very powerful lady in Indonesia, Ms. Nani Zulminarni. Nani has been working in women empowerment with grassroots since 1987. She started as a field worker at the Center of Women for Resources, Women Resources Development Center, the PPWSW, which is a women NGO in Indonesia, where she works as an organizer, community trainer, facilitator, project coordinator, and program manager. Nani then eventually, obviously, evolved as the director of PPSW in 1995. In 2001, Nani founded PEKA, a women-headed empowerment NGO that focuses empowering female heads of families at the poorest areas in Indonesia. This entity offered exceptional support for women who head families to recognize themselves as capable and making important contributions to society. Nani, through her organization, led over 60 KKA teams and served over 60,000 women who are leading or heading families, which is a remarkable work. So thank you, Nani, for joining and we hope you bring this personal on the ground experience to the conversation. Last, but definitely not least, my dear friend, Reem Khouri, who is an inspiring woman and a dear friend, like I said, who's driven by her passion for social impact. She is the co-founder and the CEO of WISE, which is an impact analysis software solution that enables organizations to aggregate their data in real time, analyze it, align it with international standards and benchmarks for evidence-based decision-making. WISE was elected in 2019 by the World Economic Forum as one of the 100 startups contributing to the fourth industrial revolution. She's also a co-founder and partner of Kamen, which is an impact design company that works in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, with governments, companies, NGOs to design models for economic and social returns. Welcome to everyone, and let's start by the first question. The definition of success is different from one to the other, as we said. So my question is to you is how do you define success from your perspective? How do you define success, and how does this definition evolve and develop over time? And it's for all of you. Whoever wants to go first, please.
Okay, I'll go first. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Abeer, for having us, and thank you, Ashoka, for hosting us. And it's a privilege to be here with Anne and Nani. So definition of success definitely evolved over time, right? So when you're in school, you're thinking about successfully completing school, then college, and finding the specialization that you want, or the major that you want. And then it's about finding the job and growing in that job. And sometimes it stops there, but for me, it actually evolved from now that I've been in the corporate world for 7 years, the definition of success is, can I actually start my own company? And that was a fantastic journey when I started Kamen as the first company I started. And then the definition of success evolved again, and it became, can I scale the work that I'm doing and use technology to actually bring that knowledge to even more organizations? And so success became about that. Today, success for me is becoming about, can I hire someone as a CEO and me become a board position so I have more time for myself and I have more time to take care of myself? And so I would say, in its essence, success is not having someone else telling you what you should be doing. And it's about you making your own choices and deciding what that goal is. And it's precisely what we ended up working on together, Abeer and Anne, right? Where when we designed a model where women had the essence of that model was women had to discover who they were, what they wanted, what their goals were, and put a plan to get there, as opposed to us telling them this should be your goal and this should be what you're doing, and showing them the way. And I think that's the most important part of success.
Yeah, I can continue from that. Thank you. And thank you, Abeer, for very deep question on this. I also have evolution process in divine success for myself. Of course, when I grew up, always thinking of how can I become better every time, and learning new skill, understanding more. So So that's one of the journey that I define my success. And after that, when I fail in particularly in my marriage, so when I have to, to get divorced and then have to overcome all this trouble, then I'm thinking of, so what is actually my purpose of life? So I then redefine my success as if I can, respond to, I can, overcome my trouble, my problems, and then transform the pain that I experience into a power to make change in my own life, and then how can I influence others? So that's become my other evolutions of redefining success. And now at this stage, I define my the success as ability to transform our power into change. Then how can influence, and how I think the most success person for me is the one who can give benefit to others, who can support each other, and who can building collective power to make a change, meaningful change for others as well.
I really echo what Reem and Nani are saying. And I think what is so important is that we sometimes realize that how much our own idea of success might be informed by others' idea of success. And you're not even aware of that. But I think over the years, discovering this freedom of being allowed to define your own success is important. And like Reem and Nani were saying, that evolution, I think, is so important. And it feels more like you're peeling off the layers of an onion to get further and further into something. And also not, I think, being ashamed.
I'm sorry, I guess we lost Anne for a second. So I will have to jump to the second question and continue our conversation. I'm directing this question to Nani, both Nani and Reem. And if Anne can catch up with us, I hope she can catch up with us. Going back to the indicators, which we talked about. Anne, are you back? Are you back?
Yes.
Yes, so please continue.
Well, I think being unapologetic about the goals that you set is just really important. And I think for everyone, especially for those women who are just starting out on an entrepreneurial journey or a change-making journey, I hope that it's a solace that people who've been on this road for a while all say that it evolves and it'll be a journey, and that it's something to look forward to see it evolve over time.
Thank you. This takes me actually to the question, or to the core. Going back to the point of the indicators and what is measured officially to report women's success. We can reference to the SDGs, for example. But what still stands out is when we are measuring, who are we measuring? We need to understand who are we measuring, and how can we take this into a holistic approach. So putting that in mind, and again, I know you work with change makers to design their approach and brand themselves for success. How would you take this when it comes to including and gender equality? How would you put that in mind when you go to the design phase?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting experience this year because we're working on two brands, which is our own brand at Brand of Change, and for an organization here in Kenya that is training entrepreneurs in the informal economy. And at Brand of Change, we have an all-female team. And because it's one of my principles, like, you need to have people at the table. Like, the people who you're designing for, they need to be at the table in order to have a voice. And what we often see in our own team is that we are highly biased. So we are for women from very different religious and ethnical backgrounds, but we design in a way for ourselves. And so we actually have a diversity problem. We often miss the men at the table, and we don't know what our biases are. So sometimes I quite empathize with all men teams, or like, how can we get women on board? Because I feel their pain. And I sometimes find ourselves like literally saying in posts, like, can some men come to this event? Because why do only women show up? Is because we are, we're an all women team, and we talk the talk of women, and we speak the language of women. And in the other organization, what you actually see is that all the people at the table are men, and we come from the outside as women. And I think that is, again, that same issue of like, well, you got to start with the people at the table, because those are the voices that are going to be heard in the design process. So that is definitely step one for me.
Thank you. Actually, I love that. I noticed that always when we're talking about women and women issues, it's women talking to women. And I really appreciate if you're talking about holistically, we need to ensure that everyone is on the table and we don't end up doing exactly what we're suffering from, or what we have suffered from. And this takes me, I think I would like to ask Nani, what's your take on that? I know you worked with grassroots, and you worked with ladies who are at the poorest area, and they're actually household leaders. What would you consider when you help them look again at their definition of success and how they define success?
Yeah, so it's to look at the gender equality as part of our goals, our struggle, right? So in the development context, particularly in Indonesia, the success of the program which addressed on gender inequality always lies on participation of women. How many women will be there? How many women become leaders? How many women attend meetings, for example? So of course, then people always focusing on how to bring women on the table, right? However, when I start organizing women-headed family who are most marginalized, most poorest, there are some other layers of this gender inequality which are around power relations. So we look at this power relation and then redefine the success of bringing women into any arena by looking at how the women can transform power relations. So power relation at different level, from the family before, in our context, as Indonesians are Muslim dominant countries where all interpreted based on the patriarchal system. So then how women can negotiate, can transform power in the family to, to also have decision-making power for herself, for family, and for the whole society. And then how can women have voice, to influence the decision-making in the community and society, which mostly around their life, but decided by others, like, by government, by males, even related with their reproductive health rights. For example, we have family planning program in Indonesia since 1970s, where women, it's dictated through women contraception for women without asking women whether they would like to take that kind of contraception or not, which affect their life. And then how can to transform the power relations in the society as a whole, particularly in the system which exists in Indonesia through the government, to the informal system, and as well as the value system.
And actually, this leads me immediately to Reem, since with your expertise in impact and impact measurement and design, and we know that when someone is measuring impact, what they focus on obviously differs. Government would probably focus on monitoring progress. The development agencies would focus on evaluating impact in gender programs, whether for men and women. So from your perspective, what does successful measure look like when measuring women in this region, when we focus in this region, on when measuring women's success, what does a successful measure look like?
That's a big question.
I know.
So actually, but what Anne and Nani mentioned is at the heart of it, right? So you cannot measure change from one stakeholder point of view alone, right? So and we're talking about just change on women. It doesn't change won't happen with women alone if other stakeholders are not changing, if the law is not changing, if the power structure is not changing, as Nani was talking about, if the men are not part of the conversation, etc. I'm going to answer this in multiple layers. I think that if globally, right, like if we're talking about it, empowerment is at multiple levels. It's the presence of choices. Do these women have choices or not? The use of choices, are they using the choices that are available to them or not? And the effectiveness of these choices, are the choices that are making effective? And we need to measure all of these. We need to measure not just these, but the contributors to those, right? And we need to be very aware that sometimes we change the law, but the behavior doesn't change. And it comes back to much more than, we need to ask why. Why is the behavior not changing? So the very first step we need to be looking at is, what is the real outcome that we're trying to do? Are we trying to empower the women to make more choices? Are we actually, did we define the goal or the success for these women on their behalf? So we decided that successful women in the Middle East are the women who are working, who are making their choices, who are doing this, who are doing that? Or are we saying that she's able to take any choice that she wants and that she has the freedom, the tools, the support system, the ecosystem, the education, the access to a network, the access to mentors, the access to coaches, the access to funding for whatever path or choice that she makes without negative retribution on her social life, on her family life, on without it affecting her immediate surrounding, right? And I think I vote for the second one, not the first, right? And so maybe the first thing to say is context matters. And we've seen that, right? And it's about asking the right questions. And I'll go back to the example of when we worked together in Saudi. If we had asked the women why they're not working, the answer would have been transportation. We have a problem getting to work. It was before the law changed for driving. And the answer would have been, my family is not necessarily letting me go to work. But when we asked the question, what do you want? Right? And they couldn't answer. They're like, I don't know how to answer that. No one ever asked me what I wanted. That's when it became very clear that we need to focus on helping them answer that question. And then from there, actually helping them get to where they wanted to be. And the result was turnover rate went from 85% to 0 and absenteeism from 95% to 9%. So we reached the outcome, but we asked the right question. We asked the why. And context matters because we also know that we belong to societies and cultures. I mean, who are we to come and say what a Kenyan woman needs, or what a Saudi woman needs, or what a Palestinian woman needs, right? Or an Indonesian woman needs. But we need to understand the context, and the context should drive the conversation. And so that's not to say that there weren't cultural and societal pressures that would stand in the way of where they wanted, or maybe stand in the way is wrong, that would make where they wanted to go harder. And so the solution and the design and what you need to measure is not necessarily always, how do I take those away? Yes, you can change the law, but you're not going to change the behavior. So maybe it's not about that this barrier is no longer there, but it's the woman's ability to deal with whatever barriers to get to where she wants to get, because the barriers will always be there. And so I would say it's about measuring the woman's ability, and going back to something that was said. Maybe in some cases it's the power structure, in other cases it's her ability to as you said, negotiate, or her ability to articulate what she wants, and her ability to find ways and find the support system and the ecosystem to get her, and seeing role models, seeing in the media examples. And I think all of this is part of what we need to be measuring. And for the Middle East, I think we need to be measuring context. We need to be making sure that we're able to measure not the fact that the barriers are not there, because the so-called barriers are how others are seeing this as barriers, but in our lives, these are not barriers. This is actually our reality, and it's our ability to deal with, be extremely understanding of the culture and the context, and always asking the right questions, because if we're not asking the right questions, we're measuring the wrong things.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I absolutely agree. And one of the very powerful tools that I have learned, again, if we're referencing back to our experience, was working with the self-branding tool, where that's why I will take now the question to Anne, considering what we have just discussed and the importance of looking at the limitations and in a holistic approach. One of the barriers, one of the most limiting barriers, are actually from within, from the individual himself. So when we're talking now, I know now we're talking to change makers who are young and full of hopes and dreams. So my question to you, Anne, what are the tools that we need to utilize? How important are these tools, number one? And what are the tools that anyone can use to go back and personally define what success means to them?
That's a big question. So what we definitely see is what Reem was articulating, which is about like being able to paint a picture of where you want to go. And in many cases, like there's a lot of different ways that people go about that. So I think there is the subconscious way. So people try out things, you know, figure it out as they go along. And there are people who are much more methodological about it. And so we see people developing vision boards or, you know, writing out what they would like the future to look like for themselves. And then I think having that idea and what you need to be recognized for in order to get there is really important. So understanding, for instance, in the Saudi project context of like, hey, you know, I would like to be a fashion buyer at a, you know, an international department store. If that was someone's vision for success, if that was what someone wanted to do, then there's, of course, the actual planning of the career, like, okay, well, let's investigate what are the different steps to get there. But there's also like, what part of my strengths and talents do I need to put on display for people to recognize that this is the role that I am heading for? So I wouldn't necessarily say like, here are the 4 models or the 6 things that you need to do. But understanding like the vision, and then what do I want to be recognized for, and what are the steps that I can take in terms of actions, and what are the things in terms of communication that I need to put out there in the world to help people actually recognize that I'm the right person for that role, or that I'm growing towards that role. And I think this comes counterintuitive to many women of real substance that I know on lots of different levels of life. We are less likely to ask for recognition for things that we've done that are remarkable. We are more likely to be modest and to think that what we're saying is bragging or it's vanity. Whereas, you know, if you talk about something you've achieved, it's not vanity at all. It's just talking about something you've achieved that you could be proud of. And so there's a lot of reframing that I think needs to happen. And also being able to practice these acts of speaking about yourself, first in safe spaces, and then going out into the world and practicing them more and more with the people that need to hear about it, I think is very helpful. And of course, that's also where the role of, I think, mentors and role models come in. So finding the people whose values you connect with and being able to follow, like, how have they designed their career? And what can I learn from that? Not necessarily to copy it, but what can I learn from it, from the mistakes they've made and from the successes? And not being distracted by the negative influences. So I know for many of us, we have kind of, examples of people who we feel like are maybe going about it in the wrong way, or who are giving us a negative self-image. And so turning the volume off on those people and turning the volume up on the people that you are truly inspired by and just learn from by symbiosis, I think would be good ways to get yourself into a position where you're more comfortable with presenting yourself well. Because we always say, like, I wish you the brand you deserve. And that can go two ways if you listen closely. And, I would say that for 95% of the women we work with, they undersell themselves. They don't sell themselves for what they're worth. And unfortunately, we live in a world where, that means it also, you don't always get the opportunity you deserve. And that's a real shame.
Wow, that was deep. So going back to Anne, taking this from the personal point of view to the organization point of view, and then the change makers again who are listening to us today, how do you support social innovators to maximize the potential of their organizations through impact measurement? How can we put them on the right track?
That's for me.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the best lessons I learned from Anne was to be intentional, right? To be intentional about the change you want to create. And it's actually a prerequisite for these social innovators. The very first part is be very intentional about, and be intentional includes the ability to articulate that change very clearly. And so I would say the very first step, so that you can maximize your social impact, is be intentional about the impact that you want to do. Articulate it very clearly, right? And so from there, you're able to, nothing that you do, all the activities that you do will have to lead to that change. And only when you are intentional and very well articulated, you're able to actually measure it. So I'll give you an example. I was working with someone who said, the program I'm creating is going to make women more confident. I'm like, great. How do you define confident? Because one person defines confident by the fact that they speak up. Another person describes confident as someone who's able to make their own decisions or start spending their own money or find a job. So you need to actually go into the nitty-gritty detail of really describing what it means for you. Only then you're able to measure it. Because if the measurement is that her ability to speak up, where are you getting that data from? How are you measuring that? Who are you asking? Are you asking her classmates if she's speaking up? Are you asking the trainer in the course if she's speaking up? Are you asking her if she feels that she's speaking up more? If the answer is actually no, is that she's actually getting a job and spending her money, then, where are you getting the data? Is it from a survey that you're sending out to her? Is it from her employer if you see that they feel that she's more confident? And of course, the more data points you have, the more valid or the more solid then your measurement is. But to not complicate it, start with one data point at least, right? But for you to measure the right thing, you need to be very intentional about the change you're trying to create and be able to articulate it very well. And of course, that also affects design. And so If your definition of more confident is the ability to find a job, then maybe you add a module where you're doing, matchmaking with employers. If your definition of more confident is her ability to speak up, then maybe you're doing a debate module, right? And so, or a negotiations module where you're teaching them techniques or communications. And so I think that's one of the best way for you to maximize the potential. The minute you know exactly what you want and you are able to measure it, then everything else falls into place. What you design, what you measure, who you get on board, who your partners are. And the other piece of advice I would say is you will never figure it out from day one. And I will tell you that in every job, I've failed a million times where something doesn't work and then you change it and you change it. So always use the model of pilot, prototype, measure, and iterate and change. And so always try to do that. Always do something small, pilot, prototype it, show it, measure if the change, like smaller measurements, just to tell you if it's actually working or not, and then make the small changes you need, or make a big change where you actually pivot completely and then launch. So that's the other advice I have.
Wonderful. So my question now to Nani, taking this, we know now that the changing behavior is potentially the biggest and most complex part of a meaningful social innovation. So what advice would you give from your experience working with grassroots? What advice would you give social innovators to truly embark on social change or in change making?
Yeah, so we usually start with, facilitating, asking the women to have their own imagination and visions of their what they would like to achieve. This is Reem said before, right? That sometimes women, when we ask women what do you want, they cannot really express what they want. It's the same when I started organizing these women, poor women headed family. So when I asked, do you have imagination or dream what you would like to achieve? They're always thinking of other people, like their children, maybe their husband, their other family. Never thinks about themselves. So and then we challenge them with that. In fact, the world change, right? The world change, and if she does not change, or she does not have the dream or a vision of their own, she will not able to reach that dream. She's thinking of for children, for example, I want to have my children have good education or become this or that. So why don't why don't you start with your own dream? Because that's usually the biggest challenge is really to transform themselves before they can transform their family, right? So that's the starting point. Always ask the women to have their own visions. They do not like enforce our visions. Oh, you have to change, you have to be transformed. Not like that, but it's more create a space for women to express, to exercise, that actually they can be somebody else. They can be someone. They can be a leader. They can be so with this imagination. And then of course helping the community, the women and the community to really mapping. I think almost similar what Reem says, really mapping different a challenge, anticipate the challenge from inside family and maybe also community, and then work how can they overcome this challenge. Then mapping out also different influencers in their life, which will influence the journey that they build to reach the pathways to reach the dream, right, the big vision. They will surely they will face all these challenges, all these obstacles because of the changes on the context. In the 10 years, for example, there will be a lot of things that have not been thought before, then suddenly appear, for example. So basically, to really working through ecosystem, not only just focusing on on changing of somebody, but someone, a women themselves, but also from inside, which Iman always said, how we can, scaling deep, go deeper on ourselves, and then scaling out, which actually reaching out more to the ecosystem, to other women, to the family members, and then scaling up, of course, changing the whole policy, values, and all the things. So it's the ecosystem thing. So I like what Rim says: start with pilot, prototype, and then measure, and then scale with these three frame of scale: scaling deep, scaling out, and scaling up.
To change the way things are measured right now, what needs to be done first, and who should start working on that from your perspective? What needs to start now, and who needs to start? All of everybody.
Oh,
but
okay.
I would love to hear from you, since you're involved with the grassroots.
Yeah.
And then, if we're talking about needing to help people go and dig deep and understand how to create a dream, because when you are actually at the low, at that level of economical, social status or economical status, you are so blinded by your immediate needs, you won't be able to sit back and focus on defining the stream. What needs to happen now to help these individuals be on the right track?
Yes.
From an organization point of view, or
yes.
NGOs.
Yes, I think the base is always start with ourselves. So I cannot organize women-headed family, by if I cannot articulate what that's mean for women in Indonesia to be the head of the family, and what kind of discrimination we experience. So it's my personal journey, so I reflect on that. So I think first thing is really based on live reality. So what is the reality of women that I'm working with? When we organize poor women-headed family, the basic need is the most critical thing, right? I cannot talk about the legal framework or political things unless these women have tangible things that they understand. Oh, how can I feed my children today? So then starting with very realistic and very basic needs, and then as an entry point, and then organize around that, understanding. And after that, talking about why do you think we are poor? Why do you think we are very sad? Why do you think we discriminate because of our status? But why do you think people always think we are bad women because our husband were divorced and the things? So with that, through this composition, they always start with ourselves, and then we have to believe on what we fighting for. We have to believe what we up to, right? We have to believe on the dream as well, and be realistic on live reality, because you cannot talk big things without ignoring the basic needs of the women. And then, of course, collective action. It cannot be alone. No, it's huge, too huge. Patriarchy is too big for us if we do it by ourselves, and it's related also with values.
Anyone else wants to come in and jump and comment on that?
On what we need to measure?
Where do we start? Yes.
Or where do we go from here? I think, so it's who's the we in the question, right? So if we're talking to the change makers, it's again, it's about their desired impact, and where they start is truly buying Anne's book, so that they can truly articulate the impact and outcomes in a very clear way, and be very intentional about the change that they want to create, and design their programs accordingly, and then find ways of measuring that change that they very well defined. I would say for change makers, we start from there. If we're saying we collectively as the region, right? I think it would be being very careful about the context and deriving ways of measuring how we're dealing with our ability to not just measuring if the barriers are still there, but our ability to deal with those barriers. And I would say even the correlations between certain things, right? So if we're looking at the region and we're looking at women participation in the workforce and the numbers are not good enough, even if the legislation changed, etc., there's a correlation there. There's affordability and availability of childcare, right? I mean, we're not looking at that, but we're saying, oh, women are not working. But okay, so if I want to work, where do I leave my child? And where I leave my child, can I afford it, right? With what I'm getting paid. How, you know, but at the same time, I need to measure how the media is talking about women and the stereotypes that they're still putting out there about, you know, what the definition of a good woman is. And letting, again, also not judging that, you know, not saying that a woman who chooses to be a stay-at-home mom is not part of this woman empowerment. Actually, the fact that she made the choice and it was her choice is the definition of empowerment. So I'll go back about the availability of choices, the use of these choices and the effectiveness of these choices, and really measuring what is contributing to that. A big part of the reason why women aren't working is not just lack of opportunities, it's not just discrimination, it's also because of a lot of other variables that we need to start measuring and we need to start working on providing solutions for. Without affordable and availability of health childcare for everyone, and you know, universal, then the expectation that the woman is gonna come to work is not very realistic. So I think we need to measure a lot of different layers at that level.
Since Reem is saying we should start with your book, and maybe you should tell us a little bit about the book and what's in it that could be helpful of social innovators or social or change makers. Not that I don't want you to sell the book. You're mute.
No, I definitely don't want to make it a sales opportunity. No. So so I'm a brand developer by training and profession, and about 8 years ago realized that these techniques and methodologies that we have in our work aren't really being used in the impact space, and they can be incredibly important because what brands, like strong brands, really do well is they have a position of prominence in the lives of their audiences. And through that position of prominence, they build really close relationships with people. So they can tie people in, they can make them loyal to them, and they, you know, for better or for worse, can create new habits, lasting habits, different outlooks on the world. And we thought this is like exactly what a lot of change makers actually need. They need to have a place of prominence in the lives of their audiences, and they need to build strong relationships with people so people change habits and make different decisions. And we realize that this is not really something that there are a lot of resources on. So I wrote a book about this with lots of tools and tips from founders in change-making organizations on how they've gone about building their brand. And that can be a personal brand or it can be an organizational brand. And what I think is important also to tie back to what Reem was saying about getting to a point of clarity, like what you often see within the change-making space is that it's really hard to create change if people don't know what you're doing or why you're doing it. And it's really sad if we don't see change happen because there's just a lot, like a communication issue, right? So I think what you see, especially when you're an innovator and you're developing new ideas on new topics or new methods of creating change, you're still finding your words, and you're still searching for the right way to tell others about it. So it's not so much a process of you need to start at clarity, but it's something that you work towards. So through the process of building a brand, you have to go for simplicity, because you can't build a brand on like, a 10,000 word document. You need to start at some very simple core. And so you have to work towards creating that core of like, okay, what do we want to be recognized for? And how can we put that into the world in the most effective way? And and we've just been really lucky in meeting people who have seen the importance of that in very different places. So in the project with women in Saudi Arabia, how can we get women to define a vision for their life and for their career, and how can we help them to build a personal brand that helps them to get there? We've worked with the Dutch Ministry of Defense. And so, it's a really interesting space. It's not necessarily, or not at all, about what usually people associate with branding, of like logos and cosmetic surgery to make things look good. But it's much more about like organizing the inside, like the driving principles and the story, and then making sure it's experienced on the outside.
I understand that we have to reach the closing. So going back to the beginning, we started with what's the definition of success? And I hope that everyone with us today started thinking, what does success, whether it's personal or for his organization or his career, looks like? And I understand that this can be different, and you have the right to have a different goal and different dream, and believe that this is what really success means to you, and then focus on that. To wrap up, I wish to request from everyone to have within a couple of minutes or 1 minute, what is the last message you want to leave to our audience? And we start with you, Nani, please.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forced to by the system, the whole system, right? Then push us to define our success, and they dictate what is success for us. So for example, success for women in Indonesia, I'm talking of Indonesian context, for example, good women, success women, where you are married, have family, and your children have a great education. You live heavily, with all the wealthy things. So that's what usually most society defines as success. I think for women, we need to have our own definition of success, with centralized to our own self. How can we make ourselves useful for others? How can we how can influence others? How can we make change? To better person for ourselves, change all the time to become better and better, and then influence others. So the best person for me, the best person in the world is the person who contribute maximum to the better world to others.
Great.
I would say, don't let anyone define success for you. Define success for yourself. I would say measure the good and the bad, because don't be scared of looking at bad data coming in, because failure is how we learn. Don't give up. Change takes time. So be patient, right? So the difference between failure and success is actually giving up versus saying, I'm going to try again in different ways. And maybe the last one would be, change starts with yourself. So if you want to create change, you have to also be open to changing yourself, how you work with your team, how you learn, how you adapt, how you implement, how you partner, who you partner with. And so it's very difficult for you to actually create change if you're not willing to change certain elements about how you adopt things.
Okay. And
yeah, I think the not being afraid to put yourself first you can't take care of anything and anyone if you're not taking care of yourself. And I think as women, we are often in positions where you have to take care of so many people that it's just absolutely, it's excruciating sometimes. And realizing that if you don't make yourself a priority, nobody will. And again, having no apologies about taking some time out to take a breath or go for a walk or do some exercise or eat with your friend, and saying no to the 10,000 request if you think like what I actually need is 20 minutes on the phone with my mom to get through the day. I think that is like true freedom for a woman entrepreneur, is to say like, well, I'm going to take care of myself first, because then I know I'll be able to take care of others better.
Wow, I'm glad you didn't say no to us and showed up. I appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we managed to inspire you a little bit and helped you. And I hope you went back and started thinking what really you can do different, and revisit your definition of success for yourself. I wish you all a very successful day, and I leave you with the question: what is success for you? And I hope you take that and think about it. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you, Abeer. Thank you, Reem. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Nani. Lovely
Bye-bye.
to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. Hope you will be in touch.